So I guess it's no secret I'm from Sweden. So you can boo if you want. I want to talk about how to make your web page really fast and how you would tell it to your boss. Oh, the classic one. Yeah, but I have it. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So. Oh, it's my computer that actually. Yep. Let's do it again. So. Now it works. Okay. So I've been to Denmark before. I actually worked a short while for UB. I don't know if you know. It was like a portal thing. I worked there for half a year or something like that. But today I work at Cybercom as a performance consultant. And I have wrote an open source tool called sitespeed.io that helps you understand if your page can be better or not. So, but today we are going to talk about the performance golden rule. Do you know about it? Does anyone know about it? Okay, perfect. So, there's a smart guy called Steve Souders that actually found out, it was like 10, 12 years ago, that the time spent for an end user, it's actually 80 to 90% that are spent in the front end and not in the back end. So, but what does that mean to us as front end developers? Do you know? Anyone? No? Okay. So, we can make sites really, really fast because 80 to 90% of the speed is in the front end. So we can decide if a page will be fast or not. So we can make it super, super, super fast. So we as front end devs have the power of lightning. It's pretty cool, isn't it? You can do it, I can do it. We can make a page really, really fast. We're like Pippi Longstocking. We have all the great power. We can make it happen. We are like Jesus to a web page. You like that, don't you? It's really, really cool, I think. And we can do it. But we are like the king of the country. We can do whatever we want. But with great powers, you know, comes great responsibility. So we need to make sure that we do it right. I'm going to talk about two things. How to be really fast. We have talked about it earlier today, so there will be a little bit repetition. And then I will talk about how to talk to the boss about it. So we are going to start at look at the world's fastest web page. And I think it's good because let's see how it's done and if we can learn something from it. I've recorded a video. Are you ready? Yep. It was so fast. Let's see if I can make it happen with that. You didn't even see anything. No, yeah, okay. So, it actually didn't work. Yeah, it was really fast. 0 seconds. You can't beat that. So something's wrong with the video. But we can move on. The thing was, the page, should take 0.2 seconds to render, and that's really, really fast, right? You didn't even see it happen. And we have some HTML, just to see how it looks like. It's really, really simple. But what can we learn from it? If we have a page that are really, really fast, what can we do with it? And how is it built? Can we learn something from it? If we talk to the management and the business guys, they will say something like this. What kind of CDN are you using? Because you need to use a CDN to be fast. But we as front-end devs knows that isn't true, all right? Because we know the golden rule, that 80 to 90% is spent in the front end of the end user time. So we decide if a site should be fast or not the CDN. Then the CDN is good to have, and it will help us to be fast all over the world. But we decide when we create a page how fast it will be. That is important to remember. And what is important to know? Yeah, it's the rendering path. Do you know about it? What's happened when a page render? Any volunteers that want to tell me? Peter? No? We have 30 seconds. Okay. So I'm going to tell it, we're going to go through it really, really simple. So when the browser access a URL, it first downloads the HTML. We all know that, right? Then it scans the HTML, and it looks for CSS files. Do we have any CSS files that we need to download? The browser do that because it needs the CSS to put a style on the page. So we have the HTML, we need to find if we have some CSS files to download also. And then it will check, do we have any JS files? Because with JavaScript, you can change the DOM and you can change the CSS. So you need to have the JavaScript files also before you can start rendering the page. So if we have JavaScript files, we will download it. And then when we have downloaded everything we need to actually render the page, we have the DOM and we have the CSS object model, and we can create the render tree, the thing that will help us to actually paint the page on the screen. So the next step will actually be paint it. So it's quite simple. We download HTML. If I have any CSS, we download it. If I have some JavaScript that are loaded synchronously, we download it. Okay, so now we all know what we need to do to make a page real fast, right? We need to optimize the rendering path. If we make it smaller, it will probably be faster. Donald Trump says, I like thinking big. But when we talk about rendering path, do you know what we should think? Yeah, think small. So that's the first step. We need to think small. But you say, what? Should we really think small? We have like the supercomputers. We have really, really, really fast internet. But we need to remember that we have the users that have mobile phones. And like the data is traveling over the air, and we don't have so fast internet. And not everyone lives in the city. So we need to make sure that every user can have a really fast page. And then we also have the magic number. You have seen the magic number before today? Do you know it? No, 14, yeah. So when the browser talks to the server with the TCP slow start, the magic number is 14. And it's from Paul Irish, but one thing that I also want to talk about is the book High Performance Network. High Performance Browser Networking by Ilya Grigorik. It's like the Bible if you want to understand how the browser do things and how it interacts with the server and how everything works. So if you haven't read it, you should really, really read it. So, okay, we know we have 14 kilobytes. And how big is a page? I think the medium page size of the top 100,000 Alexa sites is like 1.5 megabytes or something like that. So it's hard to squeeze 1.5 megabytes down to 14 kilobytes, right? So we need to focus on the above the fold. The above the fold is the thing that you actually see on the screen. So we should think small. And what do I mean by small? Yeah, this is the classic things. I think you already know all these kind of things. You need to minimize, you need to combine, and you need to avoid requests. And in a perfect world, you should not have any requests at all. So, for HTML, what should we do then to make it as fast as possible? We need to make sure that we have a really clean DOM node, because And the deeper you have, it will be more complicated for a browser to actually create the page. So it's quite easy, but you know, in the old days you had spans and divs all over the place. Nowadays you probably do things a lot cleaner. With CSS, you have heard about it, you should inline it. What? If I should have shown like this kind of picture like 10 years ago, people would have killed me. Because like in the old days, inlining was the most ugliest thing you could do. Maybe you still think it is, or some do. Yeah, of course, it is ugly in some way. But if you want to be really, really fast, you need to inline some CSS. You need to inline the thing so you can actually create the content that are shown above the fold. And then if you inline some CSS, you need to async load the rest of the CSS. One problem today is, a problem, but the browsers doesn't support asynchronously downloading our CSS, so you need to use a library. I think this is the most popular one today that you can try out. And if you don't want to keep your CSS in line, then you should at least download the CSS from the same domain as a document domain. So this is an example, I don't know if you see it, the netDNA. The problem with this is, what will happen? This is inside the head, so the browser will go through it, see, okay, we have a couple of style sheets, Bootstrap, Mezzanine, etc. And when it comes to the netDNA, it will actually do a DNS lookup, because it will need to find which domain it is on the server, and then fetch the CSS. So we will add an extra step. So you should never do it like this. You should always load the CSS from the same domain as the document domain. So, you know? And then we have the thing, we inline where it's possible, and we try to keep the CSS lean and clean, and then we need to avoid repainting. Have you used the timeline in Chrome? Or you maybe use it daily, hopefully. So the problem is we can make sure that we deliver CSS really good and fast to the browser, and then we need to make sure that the browser has an easy way to actually paint it. And we don't want the browser to actually repaint and repaint until we get the result. So if you use a tool like the timeline tool, you will actually see when the browser is repainting and recalculating. And one good thing is that it's really easy, since the guys at Google are really smart, they actually make a mark of when you're doing something wrong. So if you haven't tried that out, you should really try it out. And then they have a JavaScript. So we know that CSS, we need to inline it. The JavaScript can be evil. And JavaScript is evil. So this is like a codec moment. So you can take your photos now. Okay, so actually JavaScript is evil if it's inside your head and you load it synchronously. So you should never do that, and that is the old rule. So I guess you don't do that, right? Do we have any people from Akamai here today? No? Good. So, here's an example from one of the largest CDN companies. How their head is actually looking. Yeah. So you see that they are loading the JavaScript in head, and they load it synchronously. So even if you have a really fast CDN, it will not help you, because the browser still needs to download the JavaScript, because if you load it synchronously, the browser don't know if it will actually change the DOM and the CSS or not. So it needs to download it before it can actually create the page. So we should never do it like this. Instead, we should use async. Older browsers doesn't support it, but we have a, it's a great blog post by Ilya how do you say his name? Ilya Grigorik, I think, yeah? That you can read about what you can do and how you do it the best way. Okay, so we know that we want to be fast. We inline the CSS, and we remove the JavaScript, and we load it later, or we load it async. But then we need to measure. We have the old thing like page load time, we have the navigation timing API that can give us things how fast the page is loading. But since we want to measure the above the fold time, we have a problem because there's no tools today, or for a couple of years ago at least, that could measure that. So the smart guys created the user timing API that some browsers actually use today. And that's a JavaScript API where you can actually mark things and tell us when things are happening on a page. So instead of using tools that are out there, you need to instrument your own page to be able to see how fast your page or your above the fold content is loading. So we're going to look at it. This is how it looks like. We actually tell the browser that we make a mark, the logo is loaded. We can do that on the onload handler or when on the onload event on an image, for example. And then we can measure, because we do a mark, and then we can tell the browser and the API that we will measure this from that point to another point. So you will have a couple of different metrics we can use. The navigation start in this example, that is the first thing that will happen in the browser before anything else happens. So we're gonna see how long time does it takes until the logo is loaded, and when the browser starts rendering, loading the page. Yeah. So, and then we have the how we actually get the data. So there's one problem. Not every browser supports it. We have Chrome and we have Opera, right? So we have a hole to fill to actually make it work, because we want it to work with every browser. So what do we do? What do we use then? We use a polyfill. Yeah. So Pat Meenan, the creator of Web Page Test, has made a really simple JavaScript thing that actually makes it happen in all the browsers. So you can use that. And that's really, really good, because then you will actually be able to use the navigation timing API for all browsers. And now it's time for a demo, and I will show you how it works. Yeah. So let's see. I will start with Web Page Test. Do you know about Web Page Test? Do you use it every day, or sometimes, or never? One? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Good. Let's see if we can do it like that. Very clever. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, okay. Let's resize that and make it a little bit smaller. Okay. So there's two tools today that actually automatically fetches the user timing API. It's Web Page Test. That is a fantastic tool that uses real browsers and fetch the data. And then it's sitespeed.io. So, but I'm going to use Web Page Test today. So we are really happy if you live in Denmark, because a couple of weeks ago you got your own instance of Web Page Test that is publicly available. It's that instant alarm that give it to you, I think. So that's really cool. So what you actually do, you write a URL. Oops. Yeah. And then you can choose from where in the world do you want to test it. So, and now we have one in Copenhagen. So you can start testing your own sites. You started with a public instance, and then you create your own private instance, and you run it in your continuous integration. And you can choose what kind of browser you want to test with. Yep. And you can limit the connection, and you would surely want to try it 9 times. That's the limit if you're in the public instance. And then you actually just hit start test. So, but I prepared something for us. I'm just going to show the tool first. Oh, okay. So this is the tax. What's it called? Scott? Yeah, Scott. So they have a responsive site. So we're going to first, before I start web page test or check it out, we're going to look at the HTML. Because when you analyze a page, you should always use a tool. You should use web page test, or you should use YSlow or something else. But we can just take a sneak peek at the CSS because it's or at the HTML because it's interesting to see. So we have a lot of CSS, blah blah blah. We have JavaScript loaded inside of the head. So if we see something like that, we know that it isn't optimized. We can do better. So, and if you use a tool like web page test, I'm going to make it smaller. You get some really interesting result. So we see the first byte, that's how fast the server responding. We have the start render. The start render is when something is actually shown on the screen. So you want to have really, really fast start rendering. 1.3 seconds is quite high. You want to have it like at least before 1 second, but on the desktop site, I guess you should aim for 0.5 or something like that. And what you have the waterfall chart. Do you know about it? The waterfall? The waterfall is a representation of how the browser is downloading each asset that it's using. So when I said that if you download a JavaScript file inside of head synchronously, the browser cannot start rendering the page until it's downloaded. So, and here's the example of how it actually works. So we can check it out on this site. First, we request the HTML, and then the browser will start to scan the page, and it will find the CSS. Yeah, you see a lot of CSS, and then we have JavaScript on here. Yeah, and the cool guys, or Pat Minen and the other guys that built it, has also added the start rendering. You see that it's a green light here. So we have the start rendering. And then you can see we start downloading all the CSS. We start downloading the JavaScript files. And you also see that we're also downloading actually images before we started to render a page, even though the images aren't needed to actually start render. So here you see that there's something we can actually make better. Yeah, so that was how the actual tool is working. But I want to show you the navigation timing API. So let's see here. Is it big? Yeah. This is on the documentation site for site speed. So I used the polyfill from Pat. So you see, I have a you can scroll down so you see what it actually is first. So I want to know when is my image downloaded, because it's pretty interesting to know when that when that part of the page is ready. So what you do like that, when you do that, something like that, you actually add the simple JavaScript on the onload of that image. So it's quite simple. You do that on your site, and you will know when it actually is loaded. And what's pretty cool is that the synthetic tools like web page test, sitespeed.io, and all the not all, but many of them real user monitoring tools like Google Analytics and SWAST, and so will also pick up the the user navigation, user timing API data. So you can have data both in your synthetic tests and the same data from the real users. So if you test it in web page test, it will actually pick up. You see here, I have a user mark. We can make it a little bit bigger. When the log is loaded, and I have one when the actual header is loaded. So with web page test, I can actually see when it's happened, and there's also a line when it actually happens. So that's quite cool. Then we can see it downloaded the HTML, and it took like a small while until it can actually render the header of the page. So we use the user timing API to make sure that we can measure things how we want on the page, and then we use web page test to see it. So, okay, that was the small demo. But remember, we are the superheroes. We are the front-end devs. We know best how a page is built. So we need to be able to communicate it and tell it to our boss. And how do we do that? It depends. So I've been working as a developer for 15 years, and I've seen 2 different kind of bosses. Maybe you have something else. Let's see. I know the boss that cares about money. And when we talk to a boss that actually cares about money, we need to show me examples of how important it is to have a really, really fast page. I don't want to bore you with that today, so I have a blog post for it, where you can actually read the examples from all the big sites in the world that says if you decrease your page speed by 100 milliseconds, you will increase your conversions by 2 or something like that. So you can read all about it there. But then we also have the bosses that actually care about the end user. And that happens. So, on this slide, you probably have seen it already almost. So, there's an old classic thing on how the human mind is actually working. So, if something is happen faster than 1 second, you will not notice that you think it is still in a good flow. So you need you need to make sure that a page or some interaction happens before 1 second. Yeah. So we have the boss that care about money, and we have the boss that care about that the page is really fast, because you know that the user need that to actually have a real flow. The other thing the boss understand is red, yellow, and green. So when you're measuring your page, and you tell your boss, well, it took 1,200 milliseconds. Do you think he will understand it, or she will understand it? No. But if you do it like this, it's like magic. It's red. You know, 1,200 milliseconds is really, really bad. Oh, it's yellow. We maybe should look into it and see if there's something we can do. It's green. We passed. Really, really good. So if you communicate to your boss in colors, red, green, yellow, they will understand, I promise you. But you need to be really smart and find what kind of values are good values. And then you can use tools like sitespeed.io that actually do it automatically, or you can use something like Speed Curve that I like. It's a paid tool, but what's really good with that is that they have a nice way of actually comparing between different sites. So, for example, you can compare your site with your competitors. And when you do your slides showing how fast your site is or how slow your site is, it's good to compare it with your competitors. So I think it's really good. And you say something like this: we are 12% slower than blah, blah, blah. The boss will understand that. The last thing that the boss will understand is actually seeing things in the real world. So let's hope this video will work now. Yeah, it does. So with web page test, you can actually create a video and compare it with other sites or your own site. So you can see for yourself how fast your site is doing. And this is really good for even if your boss or someone else doesn't understand anything about web performance or if the site is fast or slow. If you see two sites at the same time, you will understand. So this is really, really cool, and I think you should all use it. So, we have a summary. Yeah, we are the front-end devs, we are kings. So we know how web page should be built and how to build it really, really fast. And what we know, we need to focus on what's actually shown on the screen. We need to focus on what are above the fold content. If we can do that, it will be really, really good. We need to keep things really, really small. It's easy to remember, right? Small is good. And for your boss, yes, make it green, yellow, or red. Yeah, it's easy. So I think I have quite lots of time left, so maybe I should do some, we can test a couple of sites or something like that. I don't know.
Sure, so let's see if there's any questions
Yeah,
first.
we can take the questions.
So should we start by giving Peter a big hand? That's one question, that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that none of you have touched on today is about caching.
Yes.
And a lot of our customers, it's a lot of them are inline tools that are used again and again every day. So for the majority of the time, they will only need to load this once, and then we are rid of all the problems with loading the content again and again. Just curious why none of you have mentioned that.
Yeah, so I think caching is super important, but and I think it's more of hopefully everyone knows it today. But I can just show you one thing. Yeah, I think we have one good example. So I mean, caching is super important. It's the number one, of course, but I think it's quite basic. Hopefully, that we all know about it. But I can just show you an example. Yeah, okay, so what was it?
Oh yeah, now it is. Yeah, it's like they take on a lot of extra work to gain these extra 30 milliseconds compared to the benefit you get out of it. I mean, a lot of times it's, well, once you've loaded once, it's in the cache, and so why spend 50 more hours of development to get this fairly small benefit when it's gone after you've loaded the page once?
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit different. It depends. So, for example, on the mobile phone, the cache, you cannot rely on the cache because it's quite small, and if you like load pages that are 1-2 megabytes, it will be removed later. So you're not sure. But then it's more of 50 hours for 0.0 milliseconds. It's not worth it. So you still need to actually make the judgment for yourself. How much can you win by it to actually do these kind of things? So you're exactly right. You need to judge for yourself. So it depends on where are you today, how much can you win. So you take that into account before you start doing things. So yeah, I agree.
So
Hey, so you're telling us to load all our assets from the same domain as the main page?
No, the assets that are loaded inside of head, that you need to actually start rendering the page. So you shouldn't shard that to another domain. But for other things, like images, that's perfect. But
So we can still use the CDN, but only for images, not for CSS? Or
yeah, if you load this, if the CSS are loaded are needed for actually creating the page or render the page, then you should load it from the same domain, because else you will have the domain lookup, and you want to avoid that for the first view.
Hi, I'm Lars. I've been working for a company that did browsers for developing countries, and something that often came up was proxy browsing, and I know Opera has had a lot of success with that, but also we had other vendors doing stuff for us. So what's your take on that? Because I think if you try to do these optimizations in page and the proxy browser backends are not aware of it, maybe you're unintentionally breaking something that would have worked faster for the proxy browsers, but now you're trying to do something inline and in-page and all this, or not. I don't know. I mean, do you have a...
Yeah, I think the proxy browser is breaking, and not what we as developers do. But I mean, I see your point. But I think, so one of the problems today is that you need to do some hacks to actually make the pages faster. When we get HTTP 2.0, it will be some other things we need to do. It will completely change. But I mean, for doing things for countries that have quite not so fast internet, we still need to make sure that we do things the best way, don't you think? I mean, of course, we can use proxies that, like Google, like the, what's it called? Page, I don't remember, Google, I don't remember, sorry. I mean, we can have a proxy that actually combine all the assets and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm as a developer, at least I want to have full control. I want to make sure what actually happens. So for me, it's better to have in our build system that actually makes things, and I can make sure that things really work, and have it on a layer above that I don't have any access to that and know how it really works. But that's my point of view.
Hey, do you have any tests or any knowledge about the average time the DNS lookup takes for the CSS? Because if you're loading a lot of CSS documents, for instance, if you have lots of different bundles and you want to preload things, there's quite an overhead in sending cookie information, for instance, with those kind of requests. And I was just wondering if there's some knowledge about when to do it. You know?
No, I mean, you can test for yourself. What's really cool with tools like web page test, you can see it. So you can actually see what kind of DNS lookup you have from different places in the world. So you can measure it, and you can see if you really needs it or not. If it will, how much it will help you to actually load it from the same domain. So it depends so much on what kind of, how you have everything set up and so on. But I think as a general rule, it's better to load it inside, not from the same domain, to just avoid the domain lookup. But you can test it for your own site with web page test, and you will see how much you lose or how much you will win by actually loading it from the same domain. Maybe it's like 200 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds, but every little thing adds up. So it's important to understand that.
All right, let's give Peter a hand.
Thank you.